Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Sometimes as a mother, I experience that the student has become the master. So I'll give you an example. My son is 8 years old, and usually by the time we sit down to eat together, he's been a pretty busy guy, and he's starving, and he starts wolfing down his food, and I say, we're all around the table, we should slow down and enjoy this meal, this time we have together, and he does. But he got me good the other morning. We were getting ready for school, and he was at the breakfast table, and I was hurriedly taking bites of my toast in between packing lunches and washing dishes, and he said, Ima, we should really slow down and enjoy this time to... I think that sometimes we have this image in our mind of what family meals should be like, sort of a Norman Rockwell painting of us all calmly sitting around the table, but the reality is in modern life that can be difficult to achieve. However, just because we're in a rush doesn't mean that we're not present in the moment. And what I'd like to explore today is, even when we're feeling hurried, can we take a moment to be mindful and enjoy what's good about life? Certainly that lesson appears in the first Seder that was ever celebrated. So I'll share with you this morning some of the teachings of Jordan Ben-Apple. He's one of the teachers at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. He brings a quote from the first Passover Seder that can be found in chapter 12 of Exodus. It's describing how the Jewish people ate the first Passover sacrifice. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You shall eat it hurriedly. It shall be a Passover offering to God. So for those that don't know what it means to have your loins girded, sounds a little strange. People used to wear long robes and they'd tie a belt around their waist. And if they needed to move more quickly and freely, they would hike up the bottom of the robe and retie the sash so that their legs could have more movement. So the image is that they're standing there with their shoes on their feet, ready to run, wolfing down the Passover sacrifice. And if you stop to think how much ritual and pomp and circumstance and solemnity went into cooking this meat, it seems kind of strange that they would sit there at the dinner table on the momentous occasion of leaving Egypt, eating their food, shoveling it in their mouth as fast as they could. The sages over the centuries said, what does it mean to eat something bechipazon, in a great hurry? And they came up with some really good ideas about how, even when you're rushed, you can do things with spiritual intention. Sforno said they were like prisoners waiting for the cell to open. In other words, the proper intention to have at the moment of leaving Egypt, where the Jews had been imprisoned for 400 years, was to bolt out the door. This was the spiritual way to eat the sacrifice. They were prisoners ready to leave. The Alshchi says something funny. He says that the matzah and Passover sacrifice were to give them energy and strength for this journey into the desert, which gave me the image of a marathon runner, putting down the power gel to keep going, to finish the race. But the Alshchi also said something else. He said, they ate the sacrifice before the 10th plague as a sign of faith that even though God had not yet shown them the final step, that this was truly it, they were finally leaving Egypt, they wanted to eat the sacrifice before they saw the proof, because they wanted to show God that they had faith this was going to happen. And finally, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says, they were in a hurry for this reason. We're ready to perceive the constant dawn in our souls, he writes. Heschel says, at any moment, we can experience greater liberation, not being bound by what keeps us small and constricted. In other words, at any moment, we are 1 second away from becoming the person we have the potential to be, and from embracing what's inside of us that's holy, and we can do this in any instant, so we should rush to do it. So that's 3 reasons how we can walk through life, even at a fast pace, with intention. One is that we're like prisoners ready to sprint out of jail. Another is that we use it as an expression of faith that we will be redeemed. And the third is an anticipation of becoming the people we want to be. Holiness does not always happen in an idyllic way. Very few of us have time to connect to the divine every day, sitting on a mountaintop as the sun rises. Right? We have to learn to do it in everyday life at a very fast pace. My teacher, Rabbi Artson, once told a story. He has twins who are now adults, but he was trying to say his morning prayers, wrapping his tefillin, his phylacteries, and his twins were 2 years old. They weren't misbehaving, but they were acting like 2-year-olds. They were running around and making lots of noise and pulling on his talits, and he found himself getting very frustrated because it was hard to concentrate on his prayers. And then it struck him. This is my life. I am the father of 2-year-old twins. I have to learn how to be in the moment with my twins. And he took a deep breath and he thought about how grateful he was to have 2 children playing at his feet and learning the tradition of morning prayer with him. And from then on, he was able to concentrate even with all the rush and chaos around him. I know I'm not alone in my story about rushing family mealtime. What should be sacred around the table is often hurried. But hurrying doesn't mean we need to start snapping at each other or missing the opportunity to connect. It's not just meal times that are rushed. We often don't have as much time as we'd like to do important things, sacred things. It's hard to have enough time to connect to the divine and to one another. But even with limited time, we can be focused, present, joyful, and grateful. Our ancestors rushed through the first Seder, but that doesn't mean it wasn't sacred. Maybe as we experience needing to rush through our preparations for Passover and Easter this week, we can take a minute to appreciate their wisdom that you can go through something in a hurried way, but with intention and gratitude. If we wait for our spiritual moments to be ideal, we may miss having one. So my blessing for us is we find a way to connect to what is holy, no matter how rushed the timing is. And as Rabbi Heschel taught, may we always perceive the constant dawn in our souls. May we always know that this moment, right now, however fleeting, is sacred. Shabbat Shalom.